My garden's over. I'm done. Hi, welcome to our channel. Thank you for joining us. And if you're a subscriber already, thank you so much for following us through our adventures around the homestead and off-grid cabin. And if this is your first time visiting, we're all about sharing what's going on around the homestead and the off-grid cabin here on our 40 acres in the wilderness of Ontario, Canada. And today we're going to be talking about our garden. This is garden update number 6. We just came back from a few days away canoeing and hiking and on a great outdoor adventure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But right now let's get down to what's happening in the garden. Before we left, we watered the garden. We made sure everything was looking okay with all the plants and thought, okay, this should be good. We'll go away and we'll come back and everything will just tick-a-boo along. And then when we came back, we checked the plants, and to the best of my knowledge, we have blight. I thought, oh no. But then I also noticed we have grasshoppers, and they were eating away at the leaves of a lot of the plants. And there's one more bug in our garden, and that's a stink bug. I was ready just to tear up all the plants and start the garden over and get ready for next year. And then Glenn suggested, well, let's just take a wait and see approach. So let's see what happens with the plants, right? So that's what we did. We cleaned up all the blight and the damaged tomatoes, and you know what? They came back. Now look at these tomatoes, for example. They're looking really healthy and good. I think I'm gonna pick these and have some tomato sandwiches. Italian oregano, cinnamon basil. They smell so good. You know, our garden is doing quite well. I'm very pleased with it this year, considering that it was an experimental garden to see how it would work putting in a lasagna or a back to Eden garden in the forest. If you would like to check out the development of our forest garden, check out this link here. Look what I found in my bird bath, a little frog. Hey guy, oh, he just jumped in the water. Oh, he got out. Oh, he's gone. This is something I put together for the birds and the bees. It's a little bit of a bird bath and some water for the bees. Kind of reminds me of being a kid again, right? Like tongue twisters, like this one. Whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot, whatever the weather, we'll weather the weather whether we like it or not. The herbs did quite well while we were away. The Italian oregano is looking fantastic. It's starting to go into flower. The parsley's looking pretty good. Now, actually, I thought the parsley would have done much better this summer, but there's also quite a bit of sign of the grasshoppers munching away on it, so possibly it's a favorite of the grasshoppers. To my understanding, basil is more of a warm temperature plant than a cool temperature plant, so today I'm going to harvest it, and I'll dry them by hanging them up. The beginning of the harvest. What's the best way that you find for drying your herbs? Dehydrator? Do you use your oven? Or do you use the traditional way of hanging them? This is lettuce after it bolts and goes to seed. Look at these atomic grape tomatoes. There's one here that's finally starting to turn color, and the other ones are still green, but they're showing their atomic grape characteristic stripes. So I'm just waiting to see what kind of colors they're going to be. Are they going to be all red and green, or are they going to surprise us with some other colors as well? Well, for the most part, the Roma tomatoes seem to have made a nice comeback, so that's really hopeful. And of course, the garden update wouldn't be complete without our new additions, like the rhubarb. Look, it's making an appearance with its new leaves. And the bees, they don't seem to be bothered by the cooler weather. They're still quite active. The crookneck squash is coming along. Now, considering that we're in hardiness zone 4B, I'm wondering if that was planted a little bit too late. Now, considering it's a winter squash, maybe it'll be hardy right through our autumn. It'll be interesting to watch and see. Now, have you ever dealt with stink bug before? What have you done? What has worked for you in getting rid of them? Like, we don't see stink bugs around anymore, but we're still seeing signs of their damage, like on these few tomatoes here. As many of you know, Glenn is a musician, and we're both nature recordists, and that takes us away from the homestead and the off-grid cabin occasionally to record the sounds of nature in this beautiful, pristine wilderness that we live in. And recently we took off for a couple of days. We went on a canoeing, hiking, and back roads recording adventure trip. It was absolutely awesome. Our first night was a canoe trip. We went to a remote lake and we stayed in the canoe all night. The sunset was amazing. It was just beautiful. The sunrise, breathtaking. It was gorgeous. We recorded all night. We got some great nature recordings and beautiful video footage. And if you want to experience it, check out this video here. Well, with autumn fast approaching us, Glenn and I have started planning our garden for next year. What are we going to do? What do we need to do this year to prepare for next year? And of course, we're going to continue with the lasagna, back to Eden style garden. We're going to beef up these beds here that we have going, and we'll be adding some other beds as well, possibly doing a few other beds. Now that brings to mind the idea of planting by the phases of the moon. And you know, that's something I've been sort of delving into, looking into a bit over the last few years, but I haven't actually planted according to the moon. Now, what got me intrigued about that was a story my mother told us years ago. And she was saying that Uncle Charlie, Aunt Helen, and herself, they headed home to the farm to help Grandma plant her garden. And in the process, she kept telling them, you have to plant your potatoes by the phases of the moon. And they thought, well, yeah, okay, we're here now, we have to plant them. So they ended up planting a larger garden of potatoes for Grandma to make up for not planting during the phase of the moon, and off they went. Well, she waited until after the full moon, planted her potatoes, and she always let them know and always reminded them for years after that she got more potatoes out of her little garden of potatoes that were growing according to the phase of the moon versus the large garden that they planted of potatoes in the wrong phase. So I always thought it'd be something unique to try is do a comparison, right? Let's do 2 beds of potatoes, one by the phase of the moon and one not by the phase of the moon, and see how they work out, see how productive they are, do the same soil, the same area, and let's see what we get. So there's an idea that I have for next year's garden. What ideas do you have? What are you putting in your garden for next year? What are you planning? What are your preparations this year for next year's garden? Please put your comments below. Any suggestions you have for us, let us know. We love reading your comments. Our herbs, the harvest for them has started, and there's some other herbs that will be hanging on. We're actually growing some seeds with our lettuce plants. Got a lot of new growth, a lot of new tomatoes. So I'm really hoping that we will still have a successful tomato harvest before the frost this year. Well, that's it for Forest Garden Update number 6. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember, if you haven't already done so, click on the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss anything. For Glenn, I'm Maureen. Over and out, and take care.